Hey, everybody, welcome to the Ethics Experts. If it's your first time joining us, welcome. And if you're a returning subscriber, hey, bestie, you have a beautiful smile. You see what happens when you subscribe to the Ethics Experts? You get a bonus greeting on every single episode. On this episode, we talk to the one and only Barry Parsons. Barry is a chief compliance officer with a great experience. He was a litigator and has built a really cool program. He's got a great background, and I think you are really going to enjoy the conversation. So get your notebook ready, get your pencil out to take notes on this phenomenal conversation. Hope you enjoy.
Welcome to the Ethics Experts, where we're elevating ethics and compliance and HR to the strategic level it's supposed to be.
How's it going, man?
Good. How about you?
Good. Really excited to get you on the Ethics Experts. We had such a great pre-call. I've been chomping at the bit to get you on here.
Oh, great. Looking forward to it.
So let's just dive right in. I always love asking this question to get started. How did you first get into ethics and compliance? Was it like an intentional path, or was it more of the story of, slipping off the log and falling into the ethics and compliance pool?
Definitely a little bit more accidental. And I've always done litigation. So, I've always done investigations as part of my litigation work. But my first foray into a major compliance role was when I was at a law firm. And I think it's a good story, not only for, how did I get into compliance, but also the value of networking and the value of client development. Mm-hmm. So I was a junior associate walking my dog and met somebody who was in house counsel at a big company who also had a dog. We started talking. We formed a friendship, developed a friendship over a couple of years, occasionally would talk about work. And I invited him to, when I was on our summer associates committee 1 year, I invited him to come speak to our summer associates. Shortly after that, got my first matter, which was a relatively small matter, kind of a test case. And then some of my colleagues did an internal presentation on some rule changes. And I thought it was a great presentation, and I thought it would be, applicable for his company. And so I suggested to him that we come and do a presentation at his company to his entire legal division, and that it would be free, and that his staff would be able to get CLE credit. He agreed. And so then I went to talk to the people who had done the presentation to, invite them to do the presentation at this client. And the partner who was organizing that effort said to me, this is your client. You need to do the presentation. We will get you up to speed. We will teach you the information, but you need to do it as part of your client development. So it was something that I knew a little bit about, but I certainly wasn't an expert about it all. And so I quickly became an expert. I dug in. The presentation, to the entire legal division went really well. About a week after that, they got sued because of some rules that they hadn't followed. And I got, and it was a class action case. So it was a big piece of litigation. So I got hired to do that, and then started to do more compliance work with them. And that was the beginning.
What a crazy story. Yeah. I mean, if that partner didn't push you off the boat into the deep waters, we might not even be having this conversation. It's like that forced you to get smart quickly,
Yeah. Or if I didn't have a dog.
Yeah, exactly. It's so crazy. I mean, it's so crazy how life works out. I mean, man, if you would have left 5 minutes later walking the dog, or if your dog would have stopped to go to the bathroom a block earlier, you might not have even crossed paths with this person. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Life has lots of surprises. You never know what's going to happen. But I think one of the important things is, setting yourself up so that when a door opens, you're in a position to walk through it. And that's one thing that I've learned.
Well, I think it seems like you learned that before this story, because you were willing to bring this person in to just add value to the summer associates. And it seemed like, he came in and kind of did you a favor. You had some value that you could provide to him with no real intention, probably, of like getting into this space or something like that. It was just kind of, to your point, you're kind of some people go through life like just creating all these opportunities. And other people go through life and they think life is so hard, and they don't see these opportunities, and they look at someone like you and say, oh man, he's so lucky. How does how does all these things kind of work out for him? And I think it comes back to what you're talking about. It's like a letting go of the balance sheet. It's like, I'm just going to kind of do good, and I'm going to try to add value to other people. And that tends to open up more doors. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, definitely. And, I'm a big believer too, in terms of, one way to help my career is by helping other people.
Right.
Providing value to them and letting them know that you're thinking about them, showing them the value that I can provide them by helping them. I've done that a lot. That's a lesson I learned. Another piece of great advice I got years ago that's really stuck with me, and it's something I've utilized a lot. And I try and always talk to people whenever I'm mentoring other people.
Yeah, my one of my life philosophies, which I stole from someone, is you can get everything in life you want if you help enough other people get what they want, and that's driven so much, So I want to go back to the litigation thing. What was it about litigation when you were in law school? I mean, because when you're in law school, it's almost like there's 1,000 paths out of law school.
Sure,
what is it about litigation what attracted you to litigation?
Actually, when I went to law school, I wasn't planning on doing litigation. I was going to be a corporate lawyer. I have my undergraduate degree is in economics, and I have an MBA. And so I just thought that, corporate law was the right track for me. And, I certainly had interest in business issues and economic policy and everything like that, and had the ability to do that stuff. But then during my first year of law school, we had to do the moot court competition.
Yeah.
And, like most first year law students, I was crazy nervous, like with the lead up to it. But then once I got up to that podium and started, talking and answering questions, it was such a high. And I was like, this is what I want to do. And then, what I focused on was then doing, litigation work representing companies, because that way I would be able to blend my interest in both business and law.
Did you, I've talked to a lot of people who have kind of come out of litigation, and something I've kind of noticed, the pattern I've noticed with them is they have this ability to get smart on something really quickly. Do you think that that's true? And if that's true, how has that helped you, throughout your career?
Oh, absolutely. I'll give you another case point. So again, when I was at the law firm, and very much in the beginning of my time there, I got staffed working on a case that involved birth defects. Now, again, my experiences in business and economics, no science background, no medical background. But to defend that case, we had to hire something like 12 experts in a variety of different medical and scientific disciplines: toxicology, ophthalmology, genetics, and several branches of toxicology, epidemiology, all that kind of stuff. And to defend the case, I had to learn all of that. I had to hire experts. I had to learn all the details. I had to take the depositions of the opposing experts, read, scientific studies, everything like that. And I dug in and I got into that. And I got to the point where, within a couple of years, I was able to write expert reports, and my experts were saying, you should go to medical school. So I was like, I've already got 2 advanced degrees. I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good. You'll need a legal size business card. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's been true with legal issues. You have to dig in and immerse yourself in it and teach yourself. And I have a couple different learning styles. I definitely learned by reading, but I learned by observing. I learned by doing, and I pull all that together. And then, one of the key things for really any of the legal work that I do is you have to take complicated material and dumb it down in a way for somebody else to understand it. Somebody else who is not going to spend, days and weeks getting to learn the material that you did. So you have to think about other ways that you could convey the information to them in a way that somebody else could grasp it, quickly and be persuaded by your position. And so, that's something that I have to do, certainly when, I'm litigating with judges, with, juries, with witnesses, but also internally with my business clients, as we analyze issues.
Yeah. And It's such a skill, right? Because you have to end up being this sort of translator in a way. You have to get smart on something. You have to be able to, as you said, sort of dumb it down. You have to be sort of empathetic to the audience to make sure that you're putting it in a way that like resonates with them so that you get the ruling you want, or you win your argument. And what I found is that, look, it's not like every litigator makes a great compliance officer, and it's not like every great compliance officer must have been a litigator. But I've just found a lot of great compliance officers have this litigation background, and they're able to pull on these sort of base tools in that was kind of constructed in that toolbox and apply them in this other role.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the key skills that we have from litigation that applies to compliance is just getting people to talk. And establishing relationships with them through a whole host of ways. So, in the compliance function, one of the things that you want to do is make sure that people feel comfortable reporting concerns or actual improper actions.
Yeah.
And so establishing those relationships with people to let them know that not only is it okay, but we want them to do that. And then when you're like conducting an investigation, interviewing people, again, to get them comfortable, because they're going to be nervous going through an investigation, get them comfortable, get them talking. And if they're hiding things, to recognize that they're trying to hide things, and use the skills that I developed as a litigator to get them to, reveal what's really going on in an internal investigation.
Yeah. Did you always want to be a lawyer? Like you did economics, then you went and got your MBA. Was that always the lily pads that you wanted to kind of hop to?
It changed over the years. So yeah, originally I wanted to go to law school when I started college. And my family background is, I don't come from money. My father was a laborer on the railroads. My mother was a stay-at-home mom. Neither one of them went to college. So, very simple background. I always was attracted to the law, but I didn't really have any experience with it. It was, what I saw on TV seemed to be interesting. Yeah. Of course, they don't show on TV people like spending hours going through boxes of documents, or now electronic records.
Eating Chinese food out of takeout boxes. And
yeah, exactly. The glamorous life. But whenever, like when I was in high school, you do those career assessments, law always came up as something. And I certainly like to, debate things and things along those lines. So I started out college, pre-law, and I thought that, political science was the major I should have to go to law school. That was what I thought. And then I took an economics class in, just as part of one of my basic requirements. And I really fell in love with it. So I switched my major to economics. And then when I was graduating college, I was debating whether I wanted to get a master's or a PhD in economics, or an MBA, or law school. And again, this was not an educated, well-informed process, but I was like, oh, MBA is 2 years, law school's 3 years. They pay about the same. Yeah. So I'll go the MBA route. So I worked as a financial analyst for a little bit after college. Then went to grad school for an MBA, did that, and was a consultant for a little while with Accenture, and enjoyed that, but wasn't passionate about it. Yeah. And so then I started to think, maybe I should do the law school thing. So
what kind of consulting work were you doing?
IT consulting. So again, something I had no training on whatsoever. But they hired me because, they saw something, and I did the training that they had and learned how to write code and develop IT software programs, and, skills that I don't remember, but I had once upon a time.
What I'm struck with in talking to you is that, like, you seem to be a guy that has a plan, but then you also have an openness to kind of take different options. Like you said, if a door opens, you got to be able to take it. Have you always kind of been that way, or has that been like a muscle or a skill that you've developed?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes things, happen in unexpected ways, and, you make an impression on somebody, and it works. I've been blessed in that way, but I'm not a wallflower. I am somebody who asks questions and provides my opinion and provides ideas. And you have to be willing to, take some strikes to hit some home runs. And
I like that.
And that's worked out.
If you hear me say that, just know that there's like an implied asterisk crediting you with that little phrase. That's a good one. Okay. So anyway, so you thought you wanted to be a corporate lawyer. You did litigation. You had that high, and you're like, wow, I can really kind of fit into this. You went into that kind of a field, and then you had this opportunity to like do this compliance stuff. What was it about the compliance? What was it as you kind of got into that work with this friend that you met that really kind of resonated with you that now has kept you in this industry for a while?
They're complementary because, a good compliance program really helps protect you from bad litigation issues. And it also, of course, reduces litigation risk. It, of course, reduces a lot of other risk, regulatory risk, reputational risk, financial risk. So they're really complementary in that way. And I think that's really what it was. And then, when I got to Freddie Mac, I was, hired as a litigator, but then started to evolve into the compliance space here too. And that's kind of, continued to evolve. I'm still in the legal division. We have separate legal and compliance divisions, but I do a lot of work with our compliance team, and really enjoy that work.
So what keeps you engaged in this field? I mean, it's changing all the time. Is it the just ever evolving challenge of how do you thread these needles and pick the locks to drive the behavior? Like, what is it that really animates you?
Yeah, it's that it's a constant challenge. Especially there's a lot of technology challenges. There's a lot of challenges in, what's going on in the world, what's going on, economically, politically, all those kind of things have an impact on, I think, on the way people behave.
Yeah.
And the technology in particular is a tool that we can use, but it's also a challenge. So, staying on top of technology, in addition to the changing legal and regulatory and political frameworks, ethical frameworks, it's a challenge. It keeps you on your toes.
So you've been involved in this industry for a while. You've worked with all kinds of different companies. What would you say is your biggest lesson, the biggest lesson you've learned in building an authentically ethical culture?
I think there's never enough that can be done to drive ethical behavior. Companies can have all the policies, trainings, and programs in place, but people are people, and if they're given the opportunity and the wrong motivation, they can and will take unethical steps. And bad actors are constantly evolving, and we as professionals have to evolve with them, and it sometimes feels a lot like whack-a-mole. And so you're constantly having to change your things in response to what's going on. It is also sad when you see otherwise good people be taken advantage of, or when their instincts to do good are used against them by bad actors, to give them a rationale to engage in unethical behavior. And so I think those are really the challenges that we face, and getting at those kind of things, the why people do things is really one of the things I think that can help most with driving ethical behavior.
So there's this, there's so much change going on in our world and in our industry right now. I'd love to talk about that a little bit. And, regardless of whether we agree with it or disagree with it, like we're kind of subject to it, right? Like these executive orders, there's a lot of panic in our industry right now about, has FCPA been deleted, all that kind of stuff. And in this kind of new environment that we're stepping into, it's my kind of thesis that the compliance departments that have, whose value as perceived by stakeholders within their organization, when that value is concentrated solely on regulatory risk avoidance, as opposed to some of these other positive externalities that come from a culture of integrity, or, you know what I'm saying? Like business quality, all those other kinds of things. I think those people are in a like relatively weaker position, and their panic is maybe a little bit more like valid. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So if somebody is in that spot, what would you tell them to do? If they're like, man, everybody in my company is happy about all these executive orders. There's this new pressure on us. They don't see the value in what we're doing. I know what I'm doing matters because this culture of integrity matters because people care about this thing. And we want to have, an organization where people are proud to work at and they're putting their discretionary effort in pursuit of like our organization's mission. How would you kind of help that person start to reframe their value proposition to the organization if they're in that sort of weaker position?
Sure, a couple of ways. I would tell people to focus on what they can control. We can't control what's going on outside. We can only control, ourselves and offer some control for our organizations. A couple of things with, executive orders, they can be changed at a whim. They're not
right.
Law. So, the current president could change the executive order easily. The next president can, as we've seen time and time again, rescind the executive orders. Beyond that, there's still laws and regulations that are on the books. And if companies need to be cognizant of the fact that they could still be sued for violations of those laws or violations of the regulations, if by the government. So they still have to continue to do things, do the right thing, follow the law. If the law changes, then, rethink things a little bit. But until the laws change, keep going the steady course, doing the right things that you've been doing. Because, in a moment's notice, you could get sued and you could be found liable for violating those laws.
So it sounds like you would say that probably some of the panic is a little bit overblown right now.
Well, there's reason to be panicking.
Okay.
As you and I are talking today, the stock market is crashing for the second day in a row. So there's a lot of reasons to be panicking. But I don't think panic should change behavior. I don't think panic should change the compliance programs and engaging in ethical conduct and making sure that an organization is constantly engaging in ethical conduct. And then plus, besides the laws, there's still, reputational effects.
Exactly.
That could be damaged, financial effects. So there's a whole host of reasons to continue down the path of doing the right thing and making sure your organization does the right thing. So
there's this sort of concept of like accountability versus like fear-based compliance. I of course want my kids to like do what they're supposed to do without like threat of getting in trouble. But I don't know, it's kind of a balance, like how do you think we better get people to do the right thing for the right reasons rather than, just fearing getting in trouble? Is it a clarity issue? Is it an enablement issue? Is it a trust in the organization issue? Like, what do you think it is?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One is you have to make sure you have strong protections in place against retaliation. Mm-hmm. We talked a little bit about it earlier from a relationship standpoint with making sure that people are comfortable with coming to report any concerns. Mm-hmm. But a big part of it is making sure that they are confident that if they report something, they won't be retaliated against. So I think that's really critical. I also think it's critical to lead by example. You of course have to have training that tells people what's ethical and what's not and how to report things if they have any concerns. But leaders of organizations need to set a strong example of strong ethics and being overall good people. And I think, if you have those two things, that really helps a lot.
You mentioned something that like when you were a litigator, you developed the ability to kind of connect with people and get them to talk. That's what you said. What has been the challenge, but that's probably on like a one-on-one sort of a micro basis, right? From a compliance program perspective, we're trying to do that across an entire stakeholder group of a bunch of employees. Like what principles from that one-on-one micro ability you had to like get people to talk were like most applicable in kind of changing the direction of the ship, so to speak, for the broader organization, sort of more on that macro level? Is it just like one-on-one interactions and those sort of stack up over time? Is it kind of getting stakeholders like managers and like people on your team to do what you said, like lead by example, and then just over time those sort of stack up and those can kind of change the direction of the wind?
Yeah, definitely that. I think, leadership at a company can also make statements, particularly if, there is any unethical conduct that's found, where leadership can make statements making clear that we won't tolerate unethical behavior, and to show by example. For compliance issues, for ethical behavior, you cannot have a situation where do as I say and not as I do. That
Right.
just doesn't cut it. People are going to model their behavior from what they see from their leaders, and so that's where I think leadership accountability really comes into play, and they have to stand behind, the compliance program, no matter what.
So I want to share this data set with you, or just this kind of. I'm going to describe this graph, and I want your reaction to it. So ECI, I've been talking about this on a lot of episodes because I'm just really fascinated by this trend, and I'm even more fascinated by people's response to the trend. So ECI, the Ethics and Compliance Initiative, I was at a conference, and Pat Harnett, who runs ECI, was presenting, and she showed this slide, and it had 4 data points. It was 2013, 2017, 2020, and 2023. And the respondents were indicating whether they had a strong ethical culture. Okay. And the data points were 60% said it was a strong leaning or very strong ethical culture. Okay. 60% in 2013. It dropped down to 61. It dropped to 57 in 2017. It jumped back up to 60 in 2020, and then back to like 58 in 2023. So essentially over a 13-year period, the respondents bounced between like 3 or 4 points. What is your reaction to that?
I guess that's good. That doesn't sound like it's, it would, whether it's going to be statistically significant change.
Right.
I could think that, some of the changes, for those years could be based on what's going on outside organizations because of external factors. Just looking at the years, I was jotting them down what you were talking about. So I guess that's good. It's interesting that it, did bounce up and down a little bit. But certainly, I think external factors have a big impact on what's going on in companies. If you have situations where, a company engaging in unethical conduct or, financial impropriety or something like that is really making the news, like, the first things that come to mind are, the Enron scandal or the Arthur Andersen scandal, also related to that, years ago. When you get those kind of things where it's people are thinking about ethical issues more, it could have effect on what's going on at their own companies. They'll start to, question things more. They'll start to have a better understanding for how unethical conduct could have a big impact on the success of their employer, their financial viability of their employer. So they might be more willing to report things when that happens. It probably gives some extra strength to a compliance program from senior leadership at a company. So those external factors could definitely, come into play and could affect, what you're saying on the margins, definitely from year to year.
Yeah. And I guess over the last 13 years, maybe like employee expectations of companies have probably changed as well.
Sure. Yeah. And it's constantly changing. You think, 2020, employees had huge expectations for their employers on DEI issues, for example.
Exactly.
And, now there's pressure in the other direction. So, that there's, we're, in a world where things are constantly changing, and those that are, able to adapt are the ones that are going to survive.
In my experience, like, people are kind of in this bell curve, this distribution, and you have kind of on one end, maybe it's 2% of the population are like maybe it's over here for you. 2% of the population are pure psychopaths. Okay. You're never going to like win those people over. And then you got another 2% of the population who are just upstanders. These people will throw themselves in front of a train just on principle, right? Like my paycheck be damned. I'm speaking up regardless. Right. And then you got whatever that is, 95% in the middle. That's really who we're kind of going after. And I don't find that most of those, like the wrongdoing that happens in that kind of wide, fat middle, it seems like it's ignorance driven more often than like intentional, like nefarious actions. Okay. So if let's say that that's true. So we have this like fat middle that are not psychopaths, sociopaths. They're just trying to like, feed them, take advantage of things. And then you have leaders, I think while no leader will like say ethics, like no leader is going to say, very few leaders are going to say in actuality that like an ethical culture doesn't matter. Right. So leaders, I think across the board, I'm sure you learned about this in MBA school that, good companies, high quality companies generate better results. So we have at least sort of mental assent at the leadership level. We have stakeholders throughout the organization that presumably want to work at an ethical company that are wired, look, I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed in my first job. I was, before I got jaded and chewed up and spit out by the Big Four machine, that was, I'm not trying to say I'm that calloused, but I'm just saying like day one is very different than day 380 in the job or something, right? So we have this sort of group of people that I think are wired to, live ethically, that want to work in an ethical organization. You have leaders who at least pay mental assent to an ethical company. And yet there's this massive retaliation problem that we're talking about. And so there's this massive lack of, to the extent that we have an ideal sort of company culture, and then we have an actual company culture, and there's some gap there. That gap there is kind of a trust issue at some level. And so like, how do we kind of address that? Like there's this ethical overconfidence at the leadership level where they're like, I'm ethical. This is an ethical company. We, all the people that are at my meetings are ethical people. I'd enthusiastically hire them again. And yet there's this perception in the organization, by stakeholders perhaps, that the deeds don't follow the word, or that, there's an inauthentic commitment to this. Like, how do we kind of address that, maybe particularly in the context of retaliation, which is kind of it's such a slippery slope because it's kind of like in the eye of the beholder. If you think that you're retaliated against, you're going to act as if you actually were retaliated against. You know what I mean? So how do we kind of connect these things? We have these, I'm not going to keep saying it over and over again. I kind of rambled through this question, but like, how do we address this dynamic? Because it seems like it's an actionable gap to close.
Yeah, I think, one of the big things is making sure that your compliance program and your enforcement efforts apply no matter who it involves. The worst thing that I think could happen at a company is for an executive to be involved in unethical conduct. And when they are, the word gets out.
Right. And
then for there to be no consequences. Because that really undercuts your compliance program. It has to apply top to bottom. And I think one of the frustrating things sometimes for people who report allegations or concerns about compliance, and even for us who are involved in investigations and internal investigations, is that the reporter doesn't always know and shouldn't know what steps were taken. And we understand their frustration, but also there are certain things we can't tell them about it.
Yeah. Right.
So, because there are sometimes, we will get, somebody will report something, but we get conflicting evidence, or we can't substantiate that, the allegations that have been made, or we take, some steps that are disciplinary, but they're not something that would be visible to the outside world. But if somebody is really engaged in bad, unethical conduct, then there has to be consequences that, everybody's seeing. If that means, separating that person from employment with the company, that's what it has to be, so that, because that's going to protect the company in the long run.
Yeah. And I guess to your point, it's kind of like a proof point of like what matters. It's like,
Yeah.
do the values actually matter? I mean, the proof comes that, it's like when it comes down to it, are you going to go right or left? Are you going to, do the hard thing and fire the top performing salesperson who a little kind of fudges their T&E reports a little bit? Or are you going to kind of turn a blind eye to it? I mean, those two things send vastly different messages. And I guess to your point, like if perception's reality, all those little perceptions stack up, people talk, and the aggregate perception is what the culture ends up being.
Yeah, definitely. And then, one big thing that any company has to do is balance how much resources you put into, these kinds of things. Do you investigate every allegation like crazy? And which could, involve a lot of time and time for you as an investigator, but also taking time away from people to do their core job duties. Or, do you only investigate the serious allegations? Do you have a sliding scale for how much resources you devote to an allegation, depending on what the allegation is? I think those are things that, companies have to struggle with and find the right balance.
What do you think the biggest challenges are facing ethics and compliance departments today? Like, what do you think the biggest thing for this year or the next 2 quarters is?
I think technology is one. I think about mobile phones. Companies have protections in place for their network, prohibiting people from sending, company information offsite, violating, privacy rights or things along those lines, where there's technology can be used to help prevent that. But somebody with a mobile phone, they can record a conversation, they could take pictures of things, and then they could do with it what they want. So that's really something that worries me, because people could do a lot of damage with that. Of course, phishing and hacking and cyber attacks are problematic. Those are causes for concern. But that, there are technological solutions that can help with that. But again, that's still kind of like we were talking about before, a whack-a-mole. Like, I think,
right.
Our InfoSec people have to be constantly adapting and challenging that. And, you only need one time for somebody to get in, and that can just crush a company. And keeping our employees vigilant about those kind of things to prevent those kind of attacks is very important.
How do you, a lot of people think ethics and compliance is dry, or they think, it's kind of a struggle. A lot of people being like stakeholders in the organization, they think it's like the anti-business department, right? Like that's the stereotype that a lot of us are kind of trying to shake off and so forth. What advice would you give to an organization or to somebody in a role like yours to make sure that they don't show up and like reinforce that kind of a stereotype? How do you kind of overcome these misconceptions that the stakeholders might have, get them to stop believing that, and really kind of engage in this risk management apparatus that, these programs are building?
Yeah, like we talked about before, I think building relationships, talking to people, being out there, letting people know that they could come approach you is very important. But I also think there's a lot of power in real world examples, and using those examples in formal training, but also just conversations. Take a news article about a company that has had a crisis because of unethical conduct, or people who got fired or faced criminal prosecution because of unethical conduct. Take like a news show like a 60 Minutes or something like that, where they've investigated those kind of things. I think giving people those real world examples and then taking that and applying it to whatever your company, somebody's company is, I think that really helps drive home the point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they can see then that these are not just sort of like theoretical academic pursuits, but rather there's real world consequences that we're trying to avoid. And we don't want to show up on the front page like this other company or something like that.
Exactly. And real world, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, that's like, we're all wired for storytelling. Like there's so much information you can convey in a parable or in a fable or in a story or something like that,
Yeah. And it's real world consequences for the company, but also for the individual employees, because, the individual employees, if they're really engaging in unethical conduct, they could face jail themselves. But even if not that, if the company goes down or the company becomes weaker financially, they could lose their jobs, even if they're not the ones doing the wrong acts, but they're seeing it and not reporting it. They need to know that there's consequences that could impact them.
So if you were to give two pieces of advice to the broad community right now, like what's one thing that we should stop doing and what's one thing we should start doing?
For the start doing, I think technology is a challenge, but it's also a tool. So staying on top of technology, learning it as an individual, making sure you have technology experts on your team that are focused on compliance issues, working with the folks in the legal department if they have tools. I think those are critical, and that's just going to continue going forward. Artificial intelligence, of course, is a big thing that could be used in this field, and you just can't keep doing things the same way that you've always done it. You've got to adapt as things are changing. So I think that's what people should start doing and having more. In terms of what they should stop doing, I think companies and compliance professionals should stop just sitting back and waiting for something to happen, waiting for somebody to file a complaint and then investigating it. I think there needs to be definitely efforts to look at data, partnering, collaborating with, colleagues in your organization who have a different focus, like audit and legal and human resources, all have a role definitely in building strong compliance programs and finding problems that aren't getting reported or finding problems before they happen. I think that's something. So don't just sit back and wait.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the best compliance officers that I know are high agency people. Like they're always looking for, that game of Risk that I love, that I grew up playing. You're always looking for more land to take. I love Risk. So but that's the game. You're trying to take more land, and take more land is not just for like fiefdom building. It's for like adding more value. I think the ones who, to your point, are lower agency, who sit back with that sort of fixed mindset and waiting for things to happen. I think those people are relatively more kind of panicked right now with all the changes that are going on in our industry.
Yeah, definitely need to be proactive.
Yeah.
Reactive.
All right. So we're getting to the end here. My last question, my favorite question, if you can go back in time to a young Barry, we can go back high school, we can go college. What's a piece of advice you would give Barry back in the day that you wish you had sooner?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I think live in the moment and appreciate where you are. Like I told you at the beginning, and this is not a compliance issue, but more a career issue, but and life issue. Like I came from very simple background, and by all accounts, I shouldn't be where I am. And somehow I did. And some of it is definitely things that I've done affirmatively to, seize opportunities, to set myself up to have opportunities. But I also recognize that there is some element of luck with it. And whether it's, some external force or it's just, it's just pure luck. The luck of being born in this country and all the opportunities that it gave, the luck of having parents who weren't highly educated and didn't come from a privileged background, but who valued education and taught me good ethics, and taught me the value of working hard. That's lucky, and a lot of people don't have that. And the luck of, being born with good abilities, and, setting myself to take advantage of those. So I'm always trying to remind myself of that and be appreciative for where I am in my life.
Man, I got chills listening to that. That was awesome. Have you heard about this study on luck?
No.
This is so cool.
Other than the movie Bullet Train, which I haven't recommended.
All right. So they got a group of people and they asked people, are you lucky? And so some people said yes, and some people said no. So that was the first data point. Then the next thing is they gave everybody a newspaper and they said, go through this newspaper and count how many, or magazine or whatever, go through this magazine and count how many pictures of cars there are. Okay. And they timed them. And what they found was that the people who said that they were lucky got the right answer in like 20 seconds. The people who said that they were not lucky got the answer in on average like 3.5 or 4 minutes. So what's the difference? The lucky people, the people in the lucky bucket, they went on the first page, on the bottom of the first page, it said, there are 20 pictures of cars in this magazine. You can stop counting right now. So the lucky people disproportionately saw that and said 20 within, 30 seconds. And then everybody else who was unlucky, they went through and they counted every freaking picture. So that tells you kind of a lot. And what it tells me is that like luck is a function of your perspective. And like when you talked about your perspective of your simple upbringing and all these things, you found gratitude in all those things. Whereas somebody else with that same background or experience, those would have all been reasons for them not to succeed. And so I just think like luck is something that we can almost control to the extent that we can change our perception. Because if we can open our eyes to these things, and to your point, live in the moment a little bit more. Look at us getting so theoretical here. But like, if you can live in the moment a little bit more and look around and see all the things that you have to be thankful for, you kind of push yourself out of the fight or flight mode or the self-preservation mode that ultimately like closes your eyes to the opportunities that are around you.
Yeah. That's great. I'm going to look for that study. That's really interesting. It's
so interesting. It just blows my mind. So there is something to that saying, avoid the unhappy and unlucky.
Yeah.
Well, Barry, this was a really phenomenal episode, man. Thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed our time together. Where could people find you? Just your home address would be fine. Just kidding.
You can definitely find me on LinkedIn, Barry Parsons. I do a lot of postings on topics on leadership, on management, on networking, on legal issues, compliance issues. So definitely find me there and invite people to follow me.
Well, thank you for joining us on the Ethics Experts. Our profession is definitely better because you're a part of it. Thank you so much for your wisdom, and we will see you next time.